In this movie, we're going to be taking a look at the sections area, these three areas right here, each of which, if we look at our code view, show a section that has a simple H2 with some paragraphs, and the last paragraph has a link. And this is repeated 3 times. Now, the only thing that we've got at the moment with regards to our CSS happens to be a section definition. And basically, the sections are all floating on the left. Margin on the bottom happens to be at 20 pixels, padding on the top of 20 pixels, and there's also a width of 320. Now, some of these may need to be changed, especially the margin values, but we'll come back to that in a second. So, at the moment, it's the H2s that I want to be addressing with regards to the images that we're going to be putting in place. So let's start with those. In order to do so, first thing I want to do is to lay out some generic rules for all H2s inside of the sections. So here is my section H2. So let's go to our CSS and we'll create a new CSS rule. Notice, compound based on my selection, I'm going to be less specific. We're just going to be targeting any H2 inside of a section. So I'm going to click OK. And since this is a generic rule, be careful because if there's any H2s inside of the footer, this would affect it as well. But I've made sure that nothing is in there, so it should only be affecting H2s. In the footer, even though we are using sections, I've made sure that those headlines are either H3s or H4s. But in this case, the specific information that I want to enter happens to be related to the category called box, and we're going to give a specific width and height. Now, the width of these areas should be 320, and the height of these areas should be 273. These are not arbitrary numbers. These are numbers that have been derived from the images and the graphics that we're going to be using in place of the H2s. So if I were to press apply, you would see that we have a lot of extra space in there right now. But that's okay because that's going to be taken up with an image. Now, before we do anything else, this is just the generic information that we are going to be defining first and foremost. The other information that we will be entering will be defined by the custom class that we will create for each one of these individually. So it's really the size that I was more concerned with here than anything else. So I'm going to click OK. We may have to come back and make some changes, but in the meantime, let's just proceed. So I've got my section area defined. Notice at the bottom I've got section H2, so I'm going to just bring that right up here. Okay, let's return for a second back to our code, and we can see that each of these H2s say something initially, but I'm going to put a little space there and we're going to enter in a custom class. Let's just call this one section 1 or sec1 should suffice. Let's create another custom class here. We'll call this sec2. And finally, another one in this H2, which we will call sec3. Now that we have those elements in place, let's go about styling them so that we can see what's inside of them. Alright, so first thing, we're going to position our cursor inside of one of these areas, and you'll notice it's this H2 with sec1 as its class. So if I go to my CSS styles and create a new CSS style, you can see here that I'm going to be less specific. I don't even need the section. I could just say sec1 if I wanted to, but if you really wanted to, you could also say, look, only within a section any class with a sec1 will look this way. So I think I'll leave it like that, and I'll click OK. The next thing I want to do is to go to the background, and we can choose a background image. First thing, now we'll explore what to do with the pixie rollovers soon enough, but in this case I'm just looking at section 1 over, or actually I should start with section 1 PNG. So if I click OK and open that up, I do not want it to repeat. Let's press apply, and we can see what that looks like. Now, we might have to go back into our sections to take care of this text, but also maybe to add a little bit of extra space here. I think I could use a little bit more just to open that up a bit. Also, we may need to enter in a little bit of extra space at the bottom. So like I said at the beginning, we will probably have to go back and do some little bit of changes to the margins. Aside from that, however, I'm pretty happy with the way things are looking at the moment. So I'm just going to click OK. Now I'm going to bring section sec1 right up to the top here. So in order to get rid of some of the text that's in these H2s, we're going to select the section H2s and we're going to edit them. And we'll go to the category called block and we'll put in a text indent of something like -6,000. Remember, we want it way off the screen. So there you go. Now all of the elements that were up here have now been removed. They're still there in our code view. Remember, this is for search engine optimization. So we'll keep those there just as if they were written. But nobody will see them. We're only going to be looking at these elements right here. Okay, a couple of other things. Perhaps in the section H2 areas, I can also edit it again. And maybe what I want to be doing is just adding a little bit of extra padding or margin. So maybe on the top, let's see, if I put in 10 pixels of space, seems to have pushed it down a good amount. Maybe we'll need to come back to that later. But also I think 10 on the bottom should work as well. If you think we need more, we'll come back and put in 20. Alright, so I've got that information in place. The sec1 is giving me the image that I was looking for. So another thing that we can do with this is to actually produce a rollover effect for it. Now we can do that by simply taking our existing section sec1. Let's try something a little bit different. I'm going to right click on it and say duplicate. Now when we duplicate, it's going to give us exactly the same information, but here's how we're going to make that different. Section dot sec1, and we're going to put in a colon and we'll say hover. The hover pseudo state will be applied to this particular section sec1 class. So this pseudo class is applied to an existing class. So I'm going to click OK. Now at the moment it's exactly the same. There's really nothing that's changed in the hover state. So I'm going to select it and let's edit this. And what we want to do is to go to our background images and we'll browse, and the image that we want is the section 1 over state. So this PNG right here. So I'll click OK, still not repeating, that's fine. And now if we look, I see what's happening. Wherever I roll over the H2, and remember the H2 happens to be rather large, so any of that information, any of that space where this is triggering the hover state will just quite simply swap the existing background image for another background image. So that's how easy it is to create a rollover state inside of Dreamweaver. And all you got to do is to complete the other states here in the exact same fashion, and that will go about creating something that looks really wonderful. However, there's another way that we can handle this, and I'll do that in the next video when we address working with the pixie rollover method.